What was the world like 100 years ago? What was the world like in 1896? Nobody here was alive then. Very few people have any memory of that period. We have written records. It was the gay 90s. A little different meaning than today with that term. It was a period of vast wealth. Some people were extremely wealthy. This didn't happen to Bethany. There were not many wealthy people in Bethany in 1896. There were a few prosperous farmers that had made money through not only dairy farming, but through cattle, trading in cattle. It's okay. Dwight Nathan Clark is such a person, and he himself would make an interesting biographical talk. But he made a great deal of money, and he made it in cattle, in dealing in cattle. He lived in the house where Paul Mangren now lives. That's a talk in itself. The age, 1896. What happened in 1896? Well, McKinley was elected to his first term. Henry Ford built his very first vehicle. It had bicycle wheels. You ever see a picture of that? Didn't have a steering wheel. It had a tiller. But it was going to be many, many more years before, well, maybe not that many years, before Bethany saw its first automobile and the first impacts of the automobile. How close are we to finishing up? To Steve? Okay. Then you're going to have to listen to me until Steve finishes. So for Bethany, you're not going to see any evidences of palatial homes. It's not that they're gone, they just were never built. Very few homes were built during the Victorian period. Generally, farming was not, contrary to, there are few prosperous farmers, but most farms were kind of self-sufficient. Before we turn off the lights, my other concern at these talks is always that most of the people here know more about Bethany history than I do, and I'm willing to be corrected, or if you have anything to add, just chime in, because we have quite a few people here with a lot of experience and a lot of family background.
I got one quick question.
Sure.
100 years ago, was Bethany geographically the exact same?
Yes, Bethany had been larger. It had included a good deal of Beacon Falls until 1871. That part of Beacon Falls was broken away from Bethany to form the town of Beacon Falls.
So Beacon Falls is Bethany, actually.
Part of Beacon Falls was the western part of Bethany. Bethany actually went as far west as the Naugatuck River. It's hard to think of Bethany having frontage on the Naugatuck River, but if you look at some of the older records before this period, the tax records and the deeds and everything, in our town hall, they include many of the industrial buildings along what's now the Route 8 corridor in Beacon Falls. Many of the we had a woolen mill. Home woolen mill was in Bethany at that time. So we had large industries before Bethany shrunk down. By the period between 1871 and 1896, we had really been reduced down in geographical size and in population. Population was hovered for decades at around 500 people. Maybe it dropped to 411, maybe it went up to 500 or something. But 500 was a kind of a plateau that we reached. Any other questions?
Hardly wait to say this.
I think I should close the door, Will, or is it too soon?
Close the soda machine.
Put the screen in front of the soda.
Yeah, that might be a bad idea.
It's not plugging.
Yeah, but
always like to find photo to start off with that kind of represents the period, and this to me looks like 1890s Bethany. The year we chose 100 years ago is just about in the middle of that decade. Very good. The transportation there, for instance, was very much what you would expect in a winter scene. We didn't plow roads in 1896. Probably rolled roads, but I haven't really found evidence of that. What are we looking at? We're looking at the gap here from near Downs Road. We have a series of photographs that were given to us that were taken by Arthur Doolittle, and I can't tell you exactly what building or what barn that is, but it's taken from Downs Road, looking up through what's called the gap. This would be probably Carmel Road going down there, Brooks Road going there, and this is the eastern part of Madmere Mountain, and High Rock is coming up here. Steve, does that look about right?
That's right, I certainly recognize it.
Yeah. What's the big difference here? Steve, you should pick that out right away.
On what?
Between, if you went to this very spot today, how would it be different?
Well, yeah, the trees. The red cedars on the upper left are still there, and the deer take shelter behind them every winter. So that's the south-facing side of the hill. It's warm. The gap there shows up nicely, and it probably confined the passage of anyone through the gap. They wouldn't go up on either side because it was very rocky, and deer break its leg. It was Mr. Strom, I think, that 200 or 300 arrowheads he picked up mostly on our properties. So it must have been a favorite place for hunters to wait for animals passing through the stream at the bottom of the gap there.
The short answer is the view.
Yeah.
The view is gone. If you stood in this place today, you would not be able to see the forest for the trees. I don't know if this field is gone, but these areas, this is all grown up. You can't, if you stood at this spot today, you couldn't even see High Rock, one of the highest spots, because of the view has been obscured by the tremendous regrowth that's taken place on lands since they no longer were used for agriculture.
How much of Bethany, Bob, 100 years ago was farm and meadow versus woodland?
I don't think Bethany was much different from the rest of Connecticut, and I believe that today we probably have, as far as cleared land in Bethany, in Connecticut, trying to think of the figures. It seems to me like maybe 25 or 50% of the land was forested in a century ago. Today it's 75 or 80%, something like that. It's probably there's half the open land. By open, I mean unforested land. There's probably half the unforested land today that there was a century ago. What do you concur with that, Steve?
Well, you're very close. I would say it was more like 1/3 forested, and today it's at least 2/3 forested. We've come up a lot, actually. The land has been cut over, and but it was mostly cleared around the time of the Civil War, I guess.
Sounds to me like we have about half as much clear land. The land was worked by hand in the 1890s. This is an 1890 photo. This is from Timer. Timer, did this come from you? And who's in the photograph, please?
That would be an earlier.
Yeah, in an earlier lifetime, too.
Looks like my brother.
Isn't that great? I just had to use that one.
Bobby, that looks like Rose Britton. He wasn't born till 1915.
Beg pardon? Well, I'm not saying every photograph here was 1896. What I'm trying to show you is the way things were done. We just don't have enough photographs of that period. This isn't yours. Is this yours, Timer, also? Is this come from you? You know where that was taken?
This is someone what it is.
You can see they have the dump rake is in the background there. I don't have my glasses on, probably should. We got two teams there.
No.
Or one, and the dump rig is just parked. Looks like fun, but my recollection of it is plenty of hard work. A lot of sweat, haze skipping to your neck, but I don't know. Maybe not even. West Rock again. And I just, this one I believe also came from the Doolittle collection. And we have, a lot of these photographs we've only just recently gotten. Not that we've only gotten them since the Historical Society was formed. So if we haven't done anything but drag out some of these photos and preserve them and so that we can show them to people and to future generations, I think we've done pretty well. But again, this is the view from Downs Road. Almost
The
seems
gap
like,
would be, it looks like it's tapering the gap in the front.
yeah, but maybe it's just the photograph, but it seems like there's a lot less vegetation on West Rock too.
Yes, that's right.
And I didn't quite understand. I like the sleigh though. Yep. I never had much experience with sleighs, but from what I've heard from actual experience, they were a lot more fun to look at than to ride them. The heaters don't work. Okay, Bethany, downtown Bethany. Now, I got to show you where you are. We're up in back of the church shed that's about to be refurbished. Church shed is a lot larger here. I wish this photograph was a little clearer. And this photograph, I think, should be recognized by Janice because she gave us this photo. And Will made this. And by the way, Will did almost all the photographs here in slides of old photographs. You remember, where did this come from originally, Janice?
I thought the photograph was like Memphis and Janet.
No.
I don't think I gave that to you.
I know you gave it to me. It's a long, narrow photograph. Remember you gave me? Yeah. I don't forget.
Probably not in my parents' house.
It's just a wonderful photograph. It's the only one we have, and as I said, unfortunately it's awfully dark. It's the only one that shows a tremendous length of the, I know you can't probably see it. This is where the church shed curves. We're looking at the back of it. This is a meadow here, but now is the parking lot for the Congregational Church. There it is with its original steeple. And this is the church shed, and we're looking at the Episcopal Church and the parish house. But that's downtown Bethany, as it looked about 1900. And Amity Road was not straight, it was just kind of curved. And my opinion is when this was taken, no automobile had ever driven on it. I particularly like this one. Again, here's our church. This is the child's house. Like an elm tree there. And there's a Surrey with a fringe on top. That's 19th century transportation. These are some of the earliest photos that we have of buildings and locations. We have this one because the child's let us copy some photographs that were left in the house that they found when they bought the place. So you can see how we're pulling together all these different resources that just hadn't been available before. I just think that's a great picture. That's Bethany in the 1890s. Bethany in about the same period. Call your attention to the buggies out here. This is this 1890? When was the?
I think that was 1910. The church was celebrating an anniversary.
Well, yeah, I don't know which anniversary it is. It would be 1909 if it were celebrating the centennial of the building. If it were of the church itself, that was what 17. Well, it would be right after 1799, wasn't that something like that? But I don't think this is 1899. You ladies probably know better than I do, but these puffy sleeves and the big hats, isn't that like 1908, 1909, somewhere around there?
Derbies on the red too.
Beg pardon?
There's some derby hats on the red.
Okay.
That might be.
Yep. In the foreground here, you can see accommodations for old Dobbin. Which one was that? I'm going to grab my glasses. Got my coat back there. Okay, that's better. There are people in the picture. We have some other photographs that taken the same day of the tent that we just haven't had a chance to make slides on it. Don't know. I just can't tell you. It might be for a fair. It's a float that was made. It's a Bethany float. It's probably in the 1890s, 1900s. It's a nice old farm wagon. And I don't know we ran across this photo. No idea. This has never been shown. Some of these have never been shown before. This is one nobody's ever seen. I just like it. I mean, it shows hometown pride, I think. That's what it says to me. And we had it. And I can't tell you exactly what they were trying to tell us there. Anybody? Any guesses what the message is?
The red cedar trees, whatever that one is.
That was for us.
You're right. Yep.
What's inside?
I don't know. No idea. Yeah, but you have people, you have to really see them with the red cedars. As Steve pointed out. No idea. It doesn't look like 4th of July, but it doesn't look like a fair. We used to have fairs, both at Bethany and then in an earlier period in conjunction with Woodbridge. And there were things like this, but it doesn't look like a harvest scene either. I don't know.
Is that a Christmas wreath to mention of that?
This one?
Yeah.
It actually looks almost more like a shield. And it's got, this almost looks kind of patriotic with the stripes. It's difficult to tell.
You know, if that was a bow hanging down with no color.
Oh, that's almost like a harvest song.
Yeah, I don't see corn. You know, I wouldn't be expecting to see pumpkins and corn stalks if it were kind of a harvest thing. Well, I think we've milked all the information we can out of that. What else is going on? Okay, what I've been doing there is just giving you kind of an idea of what Bethany was like in the 1890s. What kind of changes were taking place? What events were happening that shaped the town and made it what it is today? A lot of people don't think of that. They move into town and they just see it as it is, with no idea of how we got to where we are. And lots of things happened that shaped our town. One of the things was in the 1890s, the water company, especially New Haven Water Company, started to buy up abandoned farms, large tracts of land, hundreds of acres at a time, and ended up by owning so much land that it prevented development in the eastern part of Bethany. So that in the eastern part of Bethany to this day, the population density is much lower than in some other parts of town, and will remain so probably in perpetuity. I don't see that there's any chance that the South Central Region Water Authority that now owns these lands is about to sell any of this off, or will be allowed to. But here we are, 1892. So by 1896, by this 100 years ago, we already had changes taking place. This dam was built. It flooded areas. It displaced people. Houses were removed. Barns were removed. There was an earlier nailworks dam in back of this one that was an industry that was very successful in Bethany in the 19th century. That was gone. Again, this is a photograph that that has never been publicly seen before. I've been really lucky to dig up some of these. This is the dam when it was first built. What happened is somewhere, see the fence along here? Somewhere in the 1930s, the water company was concerned about the integrity of this dam, and they filled the road into about this level. So today you don't go down this far. So you don't really see so much of a sweep. You only see this little bit. And you know, it's very handy that we have someone there to give us an idea of size. And old Dobbin certainly helps to set the scene. This was probably taken shortly after the dam was built. Notice they don't even have a fence on the top of it. I think they'd have a tough time today with that. You know, it's just a chance kids might walk across and fall off.
What was the source, Bob? on
I'm
this
thinking. I'm thinking. Did this come? Will, do you remember? Okay. Or was it? Did we get this from the Water Authority? The Water Authority has been pretty good to us. They've gone through their files and they have dug up some old photos that they have given us. Yeah, this one came from Amity Woodbridge Historical Society. I borrowed it and copied it, or Will copied it, and then returned it to them. But you know, we have it, and you know, this is really what it's all about. That here it is today. Just like to give you a little you're going to see some of these as we go along. I'm going to give you a then and now. And you can see that when you drive down here, it seems like an impressive dam. But I'm going to go backwards now. Ready? Backwards in time also. That was pretty impressive, wasn't it? And it certainly gives you an idea of what kind of a head of water you've got there. This dam impounded enough water so that they were able to backfeed parts of southern Cheshire and Hampden by gravity. There were, up until the Clean Water Act of 1976, this dam supplied water entirely by gravity. They did not have a pump. They just turned on the valve and went out to people's faucets. Can't beat gravity. And today, this is low tide at the north end of Lake Bethany, but we just wanted to show you that the Water Authority still owns it, and fortunately, the Water Authority now allows us to walk around the lakes legally, although I've heard that some people at Tiber Downs actually walk on these properties when it wasn't legal. It's shocking.
Earl used to take me swimming.
This
Did you wear a swimsuit?
No?
I threw the telephone in here just because this was donated to us a few days ago, and it's not really the appropriate telephone, but this is to remind me to tell you that even though the photographs that we've been showing you show Bethany is kind of I don't want to say backward, but certainly it wasn't on the cutting edge of technology in general. It was an agricultural community, but in some ways we were right up to date. We were one of the first areas to have telephone service. A particular individual in town, Tyler Davidson, developed the Davidson telephone system with a switchboard in his living room, and he had white cedar trees cut down in Lebanon Swamp, one of the few places around where arborvitae grows naturally and thrives. And strung wires, evidently strung some wires in trees too, and linked up the town with telephones as early as 1898. So we're talking about it's 98 years ago, just 2 years after our 1896 period that we're looking at. So I want to show you in some ways Bethany was ahead of its time. Every time I go to Woodbridge, Russ Stoddard says, "Well, you got telephones out there in Bethany yet?" And I say, "Russ, how? We had telephones before you did," and we did. This is probably, if not the first car to run in Bethany, was one of the first cars. And I guess it is pretty remarkable. This was taken about 1900, and the photographer, I don't know how he did it, unless he got someone to take the photograph for him. This is George Levi Wooding, and he took many of the early photographs that Alice Bumpton used in her book, and that you will see in the hall of the town hall. Matter of fact, this was taken from a photograph. You can see the frame in our town hall. This is Alice Wooding's old house, by the way. If anybody's interested, there is an individual who has a sales contract on this and intends to buy it, have a closing within the next several weeks. with the intention of restoring it. An ambitious task, to say the least. But it is interesting that, and again, I can't tell you what year this is. My guess is this is no later than 1901. That's only 5 years after Henry Ford made his first car. I'm not saying production car. Forget production car. His very first experimental one-cylinder car. And in many ways, this is a great advancement over it. Mr. Woody must have been a very, very creative man. I really don't know anything about the mechanics of it. But whatever it didn't blow leaves, I can tell that. Okay, we're going to move in finally to our town report, as I promised you. And you don't have to read this, trust me. The only thing I want to point out here is it says at the annual town meeting held on October 6, 1893, the town voted to prepare a town report. And 1894 was the very first town report. There were no town reports before that.
Dad,
Yeah.
it's 1873 and 74.
18, so what did I say? 1870, I'm sorry. 1873. Thank you. So the town reports do not go back to 1832 when the town was founded. 1874. And I have 2 copies that have been, 2 different donors gave us some early town reports, and we actually have 2 town reports for 1896, and they're on the table there. When we go out, you want to look at the original ones. I also have a copy of each and every page, there are only 12 of them, that's in here. So far, these are going pretty well. You'll notice that it's the report of the selectmen, treasurers, school visitors, library committee, and a health officer. It was interesting that the health officer was a very important position in those days. If you're going to take 4 different departments to report on, I don't know, I found it interesting that I wouldn't have guessed it, that the health officer would have such an important part. Do you think there was any statutory requirements in those days? I don't know. At any rate, this was printed by Mr. Sharp in Seymour. We did not have a printer in Bethany in the well, yes, we did. I take it back. We didn't have any of the town reports printed in Bethany until Johnny Hinman moved to town. And he must have started printing them almost as soon as he got here. And that's Mr. Sharp. That's coming out very well. And that's his press. That's the Seymour Record Press. And isn't that a great old building? Now, can somebody tell me where this is? This is the one across from the bank. And where was the grain and coal? Seymour Coal? What was it? Is that next door over here? The railroad should be back here somewhere. Yeah, okay. It's a nice old house, and they probably was just a regular house with a front door there, which is gone now, with steps going down. And then they made it into a commercial building by adding this and probably opening up into the basement. I bet he had presses under here. Hard to disguise the sound. I'm sure they didn't have presses upstairs. They're pretty heavy gizmos. This is the title page. We're going to be meeting some of these people. I didn't want to make this too long for you, so there's certain people we're going to be meeting along the way. Samuel Woodward, perhaps. Noyes Clark. Noyes Clark, by the way, is the person who gave the money for our present Clark Memorial Library. Andrew Doolittle, he's Arthur Doolittle's father, and Andrew Doolittle, as well as Arthur, lived on Downs Road. Harry F. Peck lived on Peck Road, obviously, and he was a blacksmith of some repute. Joseph Swander, I heard stories that I guess he was a custodian of see this?
The old
Town
town
Hall?
hall.
Yeah, okay. Dwight Nathan Clark, I mentioned him. He's, he was very successful farmer, cattle dealer. Ransom Hitchcock was the father of, that was the Ed Hinman's grandfather, am I correct? Ed Hinman's grandfather? Because that's the old Hinman house.
Father-in-law.
Father-in-law?
Because Ed, yes, he married it.
Okay,
He married
right,
it.
right. Just wanted to throw in the school here. I don't think we've ever shown that. I think Hazel Hoppy, who, if you don't know her, we won't make you stand up, but I'll just kind of point to you. Wrote an excellent book on Bethany schools. And I think this picture, I've never shown this picture.
I think it's in the book or in the silver.
It is in the book, but I've never shown it publicly, and I just kind of like it. I don't know why it makes it look like it's somehow distorted because the roof is really not that steep. Do you have any idea, Will, how that happens? Because it's definitely a distortion. The school looks too narrow, and I don't know really why that happens. But it certainly is obvious that the school is fairly close to the road. And this was probably taken in the 1920s because they really wouldn't have cared about it too much before the cars came along. Well, but the road was first paved in the teens. And this, I don't know if this is before or after that period. But it appears to me that we have a record of when the fence was put up. I just can't remember it. And I won't make Hazel try to remember it. Make it up. What do they do?
I never saw it. The fence before.
Really? I thought this was in your book. Well, whatever.
I don't think the fence was.
Okay, well, as I said, I've never shown this one before. But the one thing that tells you that's in the 20s is, look at the tire the kid's playing with. Has to be in the teens. It could be in the teens to teens or 20s, because that's the only time you see a tire shaped like that. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Amity Road, right across from Peck Road. And I should follow up on what you mentioned. In 1933, when the state took over the road, before that it was a town road, and the taxpayers at the town took care of it. In 1933, when the state took it over, they widened the road and they moved this schoolhouse back to where it was located just north of the present center station.
Is that a pretty additional one?
This would be probably a woodshed, and out and back would probably be an outhouse.
Is that the one that's at the commission?
This is the one that got moved up to the, they got moved back from the road, then up to the ball field for a clubhouse, and then moved back down Amity Road and located on school grounds. I know Fritz Johnson used to say this building has more mileage clocked on it than any other in town. This was the first firehouse. Yeah. From 1934 until 1950, till 1950, it was a firehouse. And as I said, somehow it's distorted because it is wider than this, but it's not that wide a building. But believe it or not, they put big doors in there, just one pair of double doors, and they fit 2 fire engines in there side by side. And I've seen them do it. It was kind of a tight squeeze. Okay, but we're on page 2, which I'm going to go very quickly through here because this can get pretty boring. It's not as stimulating as the town reports that Board of Finance develops today. Samuel G. Davidson, I'm trying to introduce you to some of these people. He's Tyler Davidson's father. We're going to see where he lived, and we'll see a photograph of him shortly. Ian Clark, he is Judge Clark. Sometimes he's called Judge Clark. And Edwin, his first name's Edwin, and he lived on Old Amity Road. And he had a number of different jobs. You're going to notice that these names are going to occur again and again and again. One person will hold numerous positions. Here's your election expenses. The moderator got $2. Probably was easier in those days. Counted paper ballots and stuff like that. We're getting up to my period where I remember when Clifton Roche was the tax collector, one of Heimer's predecessors. And Janice is too, right?
What's up top, Bobby?
Auditors, Dwight N. Clark, J.A. Downs. I don't know which J.A. Downs that is. Is that senior or junior?
That's original.
That's senior.
Yeah.
See, I have a little problem knowing what's senior or junior, and maybe you can help us with that. Actually, Will has a better handle on this than I do, right, Will? Being quiet about it. Yeah, we're going to see him. The selectmen. We're going to see photographs of the selectmen. Woodward, Peck, and Davidson. And, are you bored yet for this one? These are all the people that worked at the election. Cost $29.50 for the election.
How does that compare
Probably
with today?
the election. I'm sorry.
How does that compare with today?
It's more today.
Yeah, we know that. You got into the 30s.
Yeah, right. Frederick Perry got $2, but I bet he also got paid because I'm sure the election took place in his hall next to his house. Samuel R. Woodward, and this is the period he was first elected, 1881 to 1902, so our 1896 falls right in that period. Very neatly trimmed goatee. Isn't that nice? And as I said, like many people, I believe he's also a school visitor in here. Did anybody, did we come across that yet? Yes, that's Marion Transport.
What's that Italian mean?
A school visitor. In those days, we didn't have superintendents. I mean, we really had home rule. So they usually had about a committee of 3 people, and they would supervise the schools. They would visit the schools. They would sit in the back of the class. Maybe they only go once a month, but they would really take the place of an administrator because there really was no other way to administer the schools. We didn't have superintendents. We didn't have principals. But the school visitors would be 3 parents. They'd be respected members of the community who would go and they would evaluate what was going on. If they found that the school needed repair, they would report on that. If they found the teacher couldn't maintain control, they would report on that. If they felt that the scholars were not progressing satisfactorily, they would report on that. And we have, that's a whole different topic, we have a lot of their reports, and they're pretty interesting. And let me tell you something, they didn't pull any punches. Okay, would someone identify the trio? Okay, Marion, where are you?
I'm in the middle where I always am.
Okay. and this youngster, that's Monk. I wanted to show a photograph of where Samuel Woodward lived, and I just like this one. I like the composition of it, and the color is wonderful. This is Monk's first track.
He had his office upstairs in our house, so I was told when we were living that he had his office and anybody came to do business with him upstairs.
Really? Yeah. For selectmen. For selectmen.
Main selectman, and the pauper was buried in our living room.
Really?
Yeah.
You had the wing there or the service there?
I guess so.
Well, that's before they had funeral parlors, and besides, even if they had a funeral parlor, it would cost money. And a lot cheaper to keep them in the house. I just wanted to throw this in there because one of the things I have in here that's very important that we've lost, here we haven't, but many of the farms, every farm had a name, and we just lost almost all of them. I mean, we could almost do a talk on just lost farm names. When we did the dairy farm talk, I I know we brought a lot of them back. And that's the house today. Okay, anybody? Harry Peck. Yes, he does. I don't, yes, definitely. And Harry Peck was a blacksmith. My son Bob examining one of the few relics we have in that period. This was his bellows, blacksmith bellows, that if you've ever been to Sturbridge or Mystic or something like that and looked at one of the blacksmith shop, they have bellows like this hanging, and it's worked by an apprentice usually, or sometimes the blacksmith. He pulls a lever and he closes the bellows, and the air drawn into here, this little flap, and it's forced out through here, and the bellows closes, and it comes up through the charcoal fire to heat the iron. And this was his home. This also was a photograph taken by George Levi Wooding around 1900, and the Garceaus live here today. I kind of like the old pictures better.
Their Peck's house?
Yes, that's the old Peck farmhouse. Yeah, if you have anything to add or questions, you want me to stop down?
Unusual that chimney as well.
Very tall, yeah. They must have had, although there's such a distance here, they must have had some downdraft problems or something like that. It's hard to believe that they would. But, I mean, that's the only reason you build a chimney that tall. And today. Maybe yesterday. Well, relatively. And I just threw this in here. These were all printed by Mr. Hinman. He had a very long career as a printer. And I just want to throw in the name Mapleton Farm. Probably the people who live there today don't even know the name they've had for so many years. Samuel Davidson, very active in the community. He was a school visitor. He was a selectman. I believe he was a school visitor. He certainly was a selectman. And these are the dates that he was first selected, 2 different occasions. And the reason we have these is because of John Ford, because he asked me a number of years ago if I could get together photographs of first selectmen, and I was dumb enough to say yes. And we were able to put together a lot of the early first selectmen. If you go into the selectmen's conference room at the town hall today, you'll see them all arranged on the wall. This was a tough one. I guess I got this from Marion, is that right? Did you get this from you? Who did I get it from? Oh, wait a minute. No, I got this from Marion Munsell. Marion Munsell, who was his granddaughter. That's right, granddaughter. And actually, this is a wedding picture, I think. And in the old days, when photographs were taken, the man was seated and the lady was standing. And so his bride is standing, this is her shoulder, bride is standing here with her hand on his shoulder, but we just cut her off.
How was he related to Tyler?
This is Tyler Davidson's father.
That's his father.
And I think this is when he was married to his second time. So this is not Tyler Davidson's mother. And this is the old Davidson house.
In Davidson's corner.
Yeah. And Davidson's corner. At that time, I think this sign says something that they had a tea room.
Tea room.
Yeah. And there are a lot of photographs of this farm, and you can always tell by this fence. Very characteristic. Tyler, probably Hazel Hoppy can tell you more about him than I could ever. But he was a very well respected member of the community. His daughter described him as a reluctant farmer. I think he really would have rather done some other stuff. He was also a legislator. In those days, every town had its own representative. And fortunately, we have a journal that Marion Munsell gave us not too long before she died. She died in her late 90s. And I expressed an interest in it, and she let me borrow it. And then I gave it back to her, and then a few months later she called and said she wanted the Historical Society to have it. I'm glad we do, because he kept a careful diary of everything that happened to him, day by day. And it's just fascinating, because he tells about the first automobile that appeared in Bethany, the first airplane that he ever saw, the last stagecoach. This is, of course, Litchfield Turnpike. And he said the last stagecoach, he said the last stagecoach had passed, and he would miss the driver. Met the driver, he would greet the driver every day of a stagecoach that went between Bethany and Waterbury. And this was 1907. When you're looking at some of these westerns and you see stagecoaches, it's hard to believe that we still had daily stage service in Bethany as late as 1907. Well, the first airplane was, of course, the first heavier than air plane was the Wright brothers in 1903. The very first airplane to fly over Bethany was on July 4th, 1914. It was right around World War I. And then in must have been around 1918, 1920, the very first airplane landed in Bethany. And that would be on what was, I guess, the Hoppy Farm, the Crow property, or would it be more?
I don't think they own the property.
Would Otis Carrington have owned it then? Well, whatever. The point is that he describes a plane as landing a mile north of Bethany Center, and that's the airport. There was just a big hayfield there. The plane landed, and then he mentions a few days later there's some talk of building an airfield. And we're talking 1920. And that's today.
That house is
Residence of Peter Orpin.
Probably that house is the reversal of Downs' house on Richmond Turnpike.
Oh, because the Downs house, the old...
entrance on the left.
Right, I hadn't thought about that. And these were both built by Brooks. Did Brooks build both of these? Thomas? Was it Thomas Brooks?
I think he was one of them. I think they were.
I think Thomas Brooks built both of those. Actually, this house is two houses. You can't really see it, but in back here there's an early house about 1810, and this was added to the front. And was very elegant. I mean, if you go inside the parlor today, it has a molding that goes all the way around the ceiling. That's gold. I'm not saying gold paint, gold leaf. And it's just as bright and sharp today as when it was put up, because gold doesn't tarnish. Tyler Davidson and his father and Tyler had really an enviable setup. This is one of the few examples of kind of continuous architecture, with a house and a kitchen out, and then woodshed. And out at the very end, you can't see it, is the outhouse. So he's one of the few people in Bethany, before the advent of running water, who could use the necessary house without getting his feet wet, going out into inclement weather. Okay, schools, very briefly. I'm not sure waivers mean much, but you can see the fuel, $15, $20 a year. That would be for wood. You'll notice here that I'm going to come across this again. We're just getting the idea that, gee, maybe we should put some books in the schools. Notice there's only 4 schools. Smith School is not included. It really was the smallest school district and the smallest school. We look at the schools very briefly at home. So the Smith School is not included. Woodbridge Joint District, that was in Woodbridge, and that was torn down a few years ago, about 8 years ago, maybe something like that. It was it was sort of regional because the line, the Woodbridge-Bethany line, had changed in the vicinity of Layton's Brook. At one time, Bethany went a little further to the south, and the area was reduced slightly. You'll notice that in this area, in the southwest corner of town, Bethany, there was never a schoolhouse in Bethany. The school was in Woodbridge, and some Woodbridge children, some Bethany children went, and the two towns shared the cost. So there's nothing new under the sun. This is regionalization. Beg pardon? Yeah, Peck Hill Road, it would be about, John, is it the third house on the left? Second house on the left. Yeah. It was, I guess it was really falling down. We have in the Ebony Woodbridge Historical Society, we have the original wood stove from that school, and it's a big one, I tell you. It didn't seem necessary. It's a huge thing. I want to call your attention to one more thing on this page. Watering troughs. The town was paying for watering troughs to supply water to horses. And this was a budgeted item every year. And generally what happened is you paid a few dollars a year, I think $3 a year, to the person who lived right nearby and who could take care of it. Make sure that they kept the leaves out of it and made sure that the pipe from usually was a spring up at an elevation that could lead to the watering trough. And I don't, the Russell one would be on Round Hill Road. I don't remember the code on it. Perkins?
That was just below Rainbow Road, and that was, I remember Mrs. Rose, it was a large tree from hollowed out, laid down, and they hollowed out the trunk and used it for cooking, or it was like, that looked at the,
I remember hearing that now that you mentioned. Glad you brought that up.
I remember using it. We had a horse, right? Water horse there. That's what I remember.
We have a photograph of, I don't know where it is, but we have a photograph of a wooden watering trough. We don't know where it is. Maybe we can show it to you and see if you recognize it. 'Cause I really don't know where it is. But it's it's a photograph that was taken by George Levi Wooding, and chances are that that's probably it.
It could be.
The Doolittle one would of course be on Downs Road. The Perkins one is still there.
Well, what's the big house?
This is the big iron tank that's along Litchfield Turnpike. It's still there. Believe it or not, this is 100 years ago, and it's still there. There's another one in front of Shepherd's Farm, and that was recently donated to the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society, and that's eventually going to be next to the horse barn there. And those were identical. They were probably put in at the same time. And they were used boilers. They probably came from some old steam engine or something like that.
They came from a train engine.
Yes, they look it.
Right up on the top there, and they just flipped them over, and then it turned out to be a hat.
Do you have any idea where they came from specifically?
No.
But that's what it looks like. It looks like it's a steam boiler, because it's very heavy boilerplate steel. Just showing you the schools very quickly. If you went to the school talk, you probably saw this. This is one of my favorite ones. This was given to me by Sally Hinman. Again, it makes it look very narrow. But there's your woodshed, and look at the way the ground dropped off. A tremendous amount of fill has been put in there over the years. Oh yes, this is long before. I think this is 1890s. My guess is this was taken sometime in the 1890s. These are wagon ruts. The person taking the photograph is sitting in a wagon, and here's the shafts to go up to where the horse is. This is for the buggy top. That's a stay for it. This is the buggy whip. And it's just a great photograph.
Why not the flag?
Beg pardon?
Like,
Flag is upside down. We don't, did you notice that? See the stars? And I don't know whether this was a distress signal from a teacher or what. Okay, we're gonna quickly, because you saw schools, we're gonna go quickly. Just mention briefly for those of you who missed the Historical Society talk. This is Gates School. It was located in the northern part of the town, near the intersection of modern-day Route 42 and Amity Road, then called Litchfield Turnpike. And this was adjacent or very close to the Turnpike. Litchfield Turnpike was originally built in the 1790s. By the way, this is another topic we can do on Litchfield Turnpike. As a joint stock company, a bunch of investors kicked in money, they improved the road, and the legislature allowed them to put up toll gates. And a pike is a pole, and the pole was put horizontally across the road, and when you paid your toll, they turned the pike so that you could drive on. That's where turnpike comes from. Actually, if you go on a toll highway today, or even on a parking garage, they usually have something that lifts up. Same idea. Gate school. This is Down Street School, sometimes called, or Down School. This is Beecher School. Nice load of wood there. Looks like they're getting ready for winter. Little school bell up there.
That's where the wood was stocked on the left.
In the, right. And Sperry Road is just off to the side here. You can always pick out Beecher School because it's the only one that has 5 windows. Must have been just a flood of light here in the morning. Anybody go to Beecher School?
I do.
Did you? Excellent. Wasn't it pretty sunny in the morning?
Yeah.
Did it look pretty much like that?
Very much like that. The 2 doors, the girls' entrance was on the right.
Yeah.
We had to go in separate doors.
Did you ever figure out why? I mean, was some hanky-panky going to take place on the way from here to your desk?
The entryway had hooks on the walls.
For coats.
Coats there.
And the boys closed off and smelled at the barn.
Yeah, because they had to do chores on their way to school.
And bell tower, the bell is closed in. Is that a bell tower? When you just flash, not, well, that's open. What
Yeah.
about the window? Is that a bell tower?
Yeah, they have some louvers on it. Well, all of these are kind of distorted. Why do you suppose that is?
Imagine those.
Only 2 windows, yeah.
No, but there's so many of them look like that. Could be an adjustment of the lens maybe. Anyway, this is Smith School. A lot fewer windows. And we're looking at the south view of it. Smith School faced east. And it had a unisex entrance evidently.
What was the sense on it?
They had very few children went to this school. And yeah, I mean, if you only have 6 or 7 students, you hardly need 2 doors. Remember, these are 6 or 7 students stretched over 8 grades in the early days. Later on, they moved and kind of specialized.
That's
Yes.
where Grandma Downs taught.
Did she?
What was the size of electricity Bethany had to
The period we're talking about, 1896, electricity was a long, long way off. Some of the first parts of Bethany to get electricity would be mostly in the 20s. I don't know, maybe somebody can help me. I know that the electric pole in front of my house says 1929 on it, which is, I assume, when electricity came to that part of Bethany. Since our power was coming from Connecticut Light and Power Company and not from United Illuminating would be coming up from New Haven, but ours came from the valley instead. The same thing happened with cable TV, so that the southeast corner of town got both of these utilities far later than some other parts of town. I can remember when there was no electricity on Southern Downs Road. It wasn't until, I can't remember exactly the year, can you help me on that, Will? Was it 1949 or something like that, that they ran electric poles down Downs Road and serviced people like Arthur Doolittle? He had his own generator. We have a series of diaries of Arthur Doolittle, and he talks about maintaining his generator, servicing it. The next house down was Balls. They had a mill, Balls Mill, and they had a generator in there, and they made their own hydroelectric power up until something like 1949 or something like that. Hard to believe.
What road again, Bob?
What's that?
What road again?
Downs Road. Downs Road. Corner of Downs and Brooks. That house had their own hydroelectric power within my memory. So, anybody tell me about when electricity came into their
29 on Litchfield Turnpike.
big pardon?
29
19
Litchfield.
Right, and most of the telephone poles are the originals. They got their money's worth, I guess. Yeah, 1929 is when it got to Litchfield Turnpike, but I wonder if Amity Road got it a little bit
They
earlier.
got it before we did.
What would be like in New Haven?
Well, New Haven would have gotten electricity a lot earlier. The United Illuminating Company was supplying the central business district with electricity right around the turn of the century. But that was direct current, and direct current could not be sent over long distances. So it could only supply just the central business district. It wasn't until they brought in alternating current that they could send it out into the more rural areas. There was a whole program in the 30s, rural electrification program, that tried to bring electricity to more rural areas. This happens to be, I don't know who this is, but this is taken in front of Arthur Doolittle's barn, now gone. The house is still there, but this is on Downs Road. This is typical of transportation. This is probably a dump cart. Doesn't it look like a dump cart? Usually what you do is the load, and I don't know if that's a quart or not, what is a 4x8 box, but the box was hinged right over the middle of the box was over the axle, and you load it so that it was pretty well balanced, maybe a little more weight on the tail, and then you'd be able to pull a pin here, and the cart would just dump, and you wouldn't have to shovel everything out.
That barn is gone, right?
The barn is gone. This house still belongs to South Central Regional Water Authority, and they did tear the barn down. Boy, those were nice neighbors, weren't they? Now that I notice it.
Was there more than one barn that seemed bigger?
Yes, there were a number of barns, and gradually the Water Authority demolished them. Watering troughs, this is the one that's still in front of Russell Winter's house on Litchfield Turnpike. And most people driving by don't have any idea what it is, but it's an earlier picture of the Winter house and the house today. Incidentally, the maintaining the watering troughs went on until 1923. 1923 is the last time that we paid people to maintain it. By that time, I guess it was obvious that the automobile was taking over. So it's interesting to speculate on that. Paupers, I don't think we could do this today. I don't think we could put a list of people in the town report who have received money from the town because they were indigent. I think we'd have a problem with that. Especially mentioning who's sent to the hospital for the insane. Sandra Woodward. This is, by the way, this is our Kate Latimer. But you'll notice the first selectmen are taking care of, people who have difficulties, financial difficulties. Notice here, keeping tramps. Two of the selectmen actually would take the tramps into their homes and feed them, give them a place to sleep. This is before homelessness was invented.
Charge the town for the tramps, and they probably worked on the farm.
Well, tramps were usually, Could have been, but the tramps probably didn't stay very long. Tramps were pretty much itinerant.
Champion House was used for, families that lived there, that we sometimes used any street families.
Really? Now these were
That was when my grandfather was first life.
okay. Were these local families or were these families of people that were traveling through? Local families that didn't have any other
The
homes?
house, Ward House. There, I guess
Oh, really?
Ward House,
Yeah, I've noticed, I've run across Ward Howe at a number of different locations in town. He evidently never owned property, but he did rent
Down
how,
the water company, Falls Road.
right, I've seen a map from the 1920s. I've also run across him on Northrop, the end of Northrop Road too. Anyways, if there's anything here that's particularly interesting, we talked about that. Damages, you notice we still do this, dog damage. Supplies furnished to paupers from other towns. It looks like the state's reimbursing us for this. That's probably the state, isn't it, Russ? This is the, well, we're taking care of these $19 worth of costs of paupers from other towns, and then we're being reimbursed the $19 from the controllers. That's probably state reimbursement. Roads, bridges, and sluices. That the town and the selectmen have always been concerned about maintaining roads. In those days, generally what happened is people work on the roads near their houses. Often you have 4 or 5 different people in town who would be responsible for different areas of the town. Sometimes they divided the town up into quarters, the way we still do today very often. Amity Road cutting it east and west, and Falls and Hilldale dividing it north and south. And then assigning each quadrant to an individual to supervise the maintenance of the roads in those areas. And here we're talking about, this is a road agent, and then the individual people that work on the roads. Okay, I'm thinking, why is this here? The reason this is here is because we started off with paupers, and I just love this photograph of Carrington Cemetery. This is Rainbow Road. Look how narrow Rainbow Road is. And sometime when we get rid of that dreadful hedge. I know, but I got to kid Russ here. But that is kind of a handsome fence. But in Carrington Cemetery, I just happen to have this photograph of one of our paupers, and that's pauper 370. Imagine that being given a number like that. That's William Ford, and he was brutally murdered. But that's another story. But he was a pauper, and so the town paid his expenses and erected this handsome monument.
Where's the one that was killed on the road?
Yes, he was killed by Wales Doolittle. No, he wasn't hit with an axe, but just about everything else. He was, the beating took a number of hours. He was beaten for about 3 or 4 hours. He was stomped and thrown down the stairs. It was pretty unpleasant. And he died as a result of his injuries. We still, there are still a dozen of these in the Historical Society now, unused ones. Okay, just to bring me back from paupers to roads, these are the people that worked on the roads. Lambert Wooding would have been Alice Wooding's grandfather. I believe so. Noyes Andrew would have lived on the west side of Bear Hill Road. He is an ancestor of the Earleys. Improvement to the turnpike between John Twitchell's and the Naugatuck line. I'm going to show you a photograph of that location. all these people were, see, the Litchfield Turnpike was a town road at that time, so we had to fix it. And what we're doing is we're talking about the area near the straits, and I'll show you that in a minute. And John Twitchell, of course, is the one that had the carding mill, woolen carding mill, at the corner of what is now Amity Road and Edwards Road. It's a house that belonged to Connecticut Water Company, and they recently sold it. Permanent improvement near Ellen's Ferries, that's in front of my house. Not sure what they did. I'd like to find out more on it just happened. We met Mr. Sharp before and many of these people. Mr. Perry, remember I told you that all of our town meetings were held in his hall. And you know, you're going to find these names, Arthur Doolittle. Tyler Davidson was our tax collector. Notice this, he got 2% commission for collecting the current list, the 1895 list. He got 2.5% for the 1894 list, presumably because it was harder to collect the back taxes than the current taxes.
What's the dog's supposed to do? Lost dogs or Kenyan dogs?
That's a good question. I don't know. Dog license book and dog poster. Well, this looks like these are expenses that are being reimbursed. So Mr. Woodward must have bought the license tags, a book to record them, and probably had printed some posters that said it's time to get a license for your dog. Hard to believe that they were licensing dogs even 100 years ago. The reason was, though, you have to remember, dogs could cause a tremendous amount of damage to sheep, and chickens. So that was probably the original reason for registering the dog. This is, again, the child's house, Amity Road, before it was modernized, not paved. Again, this has got to be around 1900. This is not telegraph, this is telephone pole. And it's got telephone wires on it. No electric wires yet, though. Remember? We have telephones but no electricity. This is the only photograph that I have ever been able to find of Perry's Hall. There may be others of the outside of it. If anybody knows of any other old photographs, if you have any at home or that you're willing to lend us and let Will just take a picture of them, all he does is he takes the old photograph and he sets up his camera on top of it, over it rather, and gets the right lenses and the right lighting, and he makes something like this, and now we have something that we can show the public. So if you have something like that, please tell me. This is, we're getting to the roads, and this building is the front part, or the residential part of the Twitchell Mill. And this has recently been renovated, and the house has been sold. Interestingly enough, they didn't sell the land. They only sold the house. They're renting the land for 99 years. Up and back here, I have some excellent photographs of the mill pond. And unfortunately, you just can't see it from the road, because it's just a beautiful place. There's a little pond called Twitchell Pond up there, and it originally fed the mill that stood back. And now we're looking at the part of the area, I love the colors here. We're looking at the area where that mailbox probably goes to the Twitchell House. Edwards Road is just beyond that. We're looking north on present-day Amity Road. But those of you who have been around a while remember this was Litchfield Turnpike. And when it was originally chartered, it was called the Straits Turnpike. And the reason was it went from the New Haven Green to the Litchfield Green through the Straits. And these are the Straits. This narrow opening in the mountains that allows a road to parallel Beacon Hill Brook as it travels.
It's still streets, Turnpike,
In some areas, yes. Today is
Now Amity Road.
today.
From Old Amity Road north is the children.
Today this is Amity Road. This is called Amity Road.
Show you on that.
All of these addresses are Amity Road. The trailer park is 1070 Amity Road, for instance. It was, well, you may be looking at an older map. Amity Road used to stop at the intersection of Tuttle Court, or about at the intersection of Tuttle Court. When, well, there isn't any Old Amity Road at that point. Old Amity Road is down, okay. Again, there's no old Litchfield Turnpike either, there's just Litchfield Turnpike. Because there's no new Litchfield Turnpike. I know some people say that, but the point is that when the town numbered started with street numbering back in the 70s, I can't remember what year it was, we made some changes in road names. And some of them were popular, some were unpopular. This one, for instance, it was decided that this section should continue, should be changed to Amity Road because I guess it was thought that Amity Road should go from the Woodbridge line to the Naugatuck line, and or at least should be changed. This was originally changed to New Haven Road for a period of a few months because I own a piece of property here, and I remember getting a notification that this was going to be now called New Haven Road. Well, it was called New Haven Road in Naugatuck, but these people did not want New Haven Road. And the selectmen then changed it from New Haven Road to Amity Road. And that's how it is today. All of the houses on this old road and the new widened, straightened road have Amity Road addresses today.
There's 42 behind us on that last picture. Wait.
Yeah.
Back.
Yes, way back.
This is where the road takes and then Brooklyn
this-
West.
Yes, this is Lineweber's driveway is in that area.
There's a brook there.
This is Arrowhead Grove sign right in there. And that's the little beacon.
What's the name of the road that's going the old way around before it comes back in there?
Okay, the little horseshoe
Yeah.
that starts where the old tunnel house was. Boy, that's not too helpful to new people. That actually, that's called Litchfield Turnpike. And it actually has a state route number, a 3-digit state route number. Will, do you remember what that is? Something like 370 or something like that. But it only goes from the intersection just north of Tuttle Court to the intersection with Route 42. It has that number, and then the rest of that little curve in front of the old Cartmel house it's all called Litchfield Turnpike, but that section is called Route 42. Does that help you at all?
Yeah.
Trust me. Here's a house you've never seen. That's a photograph of the farmhouse that stood where we live today, and this burned in 1927. But it was a home of Ellen Sperry and her father Enos Sperry before her. And you'll remember back there it said improvement to the road near Ellen Sperry's. And underneath it, I don't know if you noticed, it said, "This improvement is not complete." Well, this is 20 years later, and it still isn't complete. I just love this one. It's actually just over the line into Woodbridge, but it shows you what Bethany roads were like before the state came along. The Grange was very active at this time, trying to get Connecticut out of the mud, get paved roads. Everybody wanted paved roads. Roads were almost impassable during the spring. Summertime when they were dry, yes, you had dust, at least they were passable. In the winter, they were good because you could use a sleigh, but in springtime, this happens to be 1917, that's why you see the one. I've used this one before, I think. Maybe I have a series of photographs that were given to me by Clifford Whitlock, who was standing here next to his Rio car, which is Meyer. And he took a series of photographs, or had a series of photographs taken to try and convince the state that they should do something about appalling conditions of road. This is 1972. Perry's Hall, remember we mentioned Perry's Hall. Remember, Bethany didn't have a town hall in 1896. So we always, from 1832 until 1914, we always had to rent space for town meetings, for voting, and for any other municipal use, even for selectmen's meetings. Some of the earliest entries that we've run across, matter of fact, there were some very early entries we found in some papers that had been stored up in the attic of the Clark Memorial Library that probably had been up there since 1936. Some of the entries were extremely early. One of them was a bill for candles and entertainment for the selectmen when they were when they had their very first meeting in 1832. Interior photograph of Perry's Hall. Some of these benches are still around. I know the Sandells donated one of them to the Center Schoolhouse. We had one in the Central Schoolhouse. No, believe it or not, they're still around. These benches are older than the Bethany. This is not the Bethany Town Hall. This is Perry's Hall. I don't know. The town must have owned the benches at that time. Okay, recapitulation. Just very quickly, we won't spend much time. We talked about all those things. Liabilities, resources. Look at that. It's, surplus. There are your selectmen again. Okay, who is it? Yes, very good. Yes, he does. Yeah. And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is Jerome Downs Sr. Yes, I know. I had a picture of Jerome Jr. and I
Jerome
decided.
Jr. was my Earl Bachelor's grandfather. Is that right, Ernie?
Yeah.
So this is your great-grandfather. I have to bring in farm names somewhere along the line. I really miss these. And this is Jerome and Son, 1926. These are where the letterheads or billheads, in this case, were printed by Johnny Henry.
You know where the
I'm sorry.
Rojo came from?
Yeah, Jerome and
Romy
and
Romy
Josephine.
and Josephine.
Josephine, right.
He used to be called Romy.
Romy down. Oh, look at the telephone here. Liberty. 2677. I guess that's ring 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but you know, when you look at this, you have to remember that. At least I remember as a kid having a party line. That was the information superhighway in those days. You could just pick up the phone and you could hear what was going on. If you picked it up quietly enough so nobody could hear the click at the other end.
I think there was a full arm going up, you know, by where you were. And then it broke down and it went up.
Oh, you mean the number of wires
Lines,
going out? Yeah. Now, at that time, say in 19, well, you don't remember that because you were too young. But this is there were no cables. Every wire had its own.
2 wires. Two
There was a-
wires made a line.
Okay, and were the 2 wires separate? I mean, they were on different
Yep.
insulators. So if you counted the insulators, you had half that many lines because you need a pair.
Where you have 5 to an arm. 5 lines to an arm.
Five
Separate lines.
separate wires.
No, lines. A line is 2 wires.
Okay, so you get 10 on an arm. And you said there was
No,
10
5.
wires. Yeah, 10,
3 on the
5
side.
pair. Anybody? Dwight and Clark. They showed Mr. Downs and then Mr. Clark. And this is the man I told you was quite interesting. But the other, I'd like to get more photos of people in town with name. I know a lot of you have photos in the attic like I do. You don't have a clue who they are. They're not much help. But if you can find photographs of people that played a part in the town, men and women, not just men. I mean, this is pretty heavy on guys because we're doing a town report, and in those days, you know, the political activity was masking. But I really like to have them because I think we can do a lot of biographical stuff. But that's Dwight and Clark in his younger days. As I said, very interesting character. Evidently, he had feelings that a library should be formed, and I think his son tried to carry those out. And that's how Bethany and Woodbridge got their libraries donated. He made a handsome gift to Bethany of $50,000, which was a lot of money in 1936. We're talking about Depression times. And this was his house. You probably don't recognize it. This is one of the few houses in Bethany that was Victorianized. There's a house that was built about 1820, and then in the 1860s, 70s, whatever, they tried to bring it up to date, make it more modern, make it Victorian. Very few people in town had enough money to do this kind of thing, to just make their house more stylish. And Dwight and Clark was one of them. And this, of course, is the house where Paul Manger lives today. And this is gone. This is gone. This is gone. I think this still remains. But basically, these are all things that were added later, just to kind of make it more modern. And now it's been kind of stripped away. I don't think anybody's ever seen that one either. And today, no, see, even the bay window's gone. It's really back. It looks now pretty much the way it did in 1820. But it's the same house that had been modernized in the late 19th century. But that's how it would have looked in 1896. Today, and of course, as I said, Noyes Clark was the one that donated the library in memory of his father, Dwight, and his mother, Althea. And Edwin Clark, remember we talked about him? He was treasurer of the town. Something particularly interesting here. And that's Edwin Clark. Quite a mustache. That's known as a soup strainer. And this is where he lived. The house still stands, and it's on Old Man Road, and it looks pretty much like that today. Hiram Davidson, school visitor. Actually, he was a teacher in Smith School for for several years. First selectman in Bethany. Minnow Brook Farm. How many people know that? Abstracts of expenses. The only thing here interesting is if you want to go for a 10-year comparison of 1886 to 1896, the school expenditure is $1,263, and it skyrocketed up to $1,295 in 10 short years. I don't understand why the selectman's salary went from $123.28 down to $93.05. We won't go into that. The indebtedness is pretty small here. I'm not sure what a dollar was worth in those days. Just before World War I, a factory worker made about $1 a day. In 1896, I'm not sure. Anybody have any ideas on that? School visitors report. You might want to read this. It's kind of fun. School in the Center District taking into consideration that 3 different teachers were employed during the school year. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? mention should be made of advancing the pupils during the winter term. So they say this is a good one. The others, we got rid of them. Who was a good disciplinarian? I don't know if that means that she spared the rod or didn't spare the rod. Let's see. Skate school has been well taught and governed. Teacher was thorough in all work, concerning the different methods of instruction. School Downs, under the same teacher as last year, made fair advancement. That sounds like faint praise to me. The order was good and the teacher interested in his work, a male teacher in this case. Progress was made by some of the smaller scholars. Beecher School, a fair advancement for the winter term, but the summer term was poorly attended. It's a little tough, there's a lot of farming. Teacher manifested but little interest in the school, which fact is to be regretted. I told you they didn't pull any punches. All new teachers for 1896, so they didn't keep anybody on. These are the children enumerated. You notice in Smith School, in the Smith School District, there are only 7 children, so why bother? So they were kind of farmed out. They didn't have any school that particular year. And here are the schools. And the costs. And there's Noyes Clark and Samuel River acting school visitors. We've always talked about Beer's Atlas. I don't know if any of you have ever seen one of the atlases. Everybody sees the map, the Beer's map that many of us have in our homes and we have in the town hall. This is a title page from it, and that's exactly what it was. 1868. They just had a page for every town in Bethany, in New Haven County, and this is Bethany. The reason I throw it on here is to give you an idea. One of the things they thought was very important was school districts, and they're in different colors. The Union School District, or Center School District, they changed over the years, by the way. This is 1868, so it was a little bit different. Here, to answer your question, Bob, Bethany, this is northern Bethany. It's pretty much like this today, except we don't have this anymore. See the Naugatuck River going down here? And you see all the businesses here? Now here's an inset. They've taken this little piece here and put it here so that they can show you all the businesses down here. And when you see something like that, that's a big brick factory. And what's that? We lost. Yep. I don't know if it's a loss or a gain, but yeah, that's how they do it. The North District is Gate. This is Smith. Smith School is in District number 3. The east one here, District number 4, at the Downs Road School. This one is Beecher Road. Over here, this is the one where the school is William Woodbridge, right here. So this district never had a school. One interesting thing I only noticed when I was setting this up a couple days ago was if you take Amity Road, present-day Amity Road, and follow it up, this is actually used to be Litchfield Turnpike. You take that and you divide the town in half, you find there was never a schoolhouse in the western part of the town. I never thought about it. I don't know if anybody else ever had it. There never was a schoolhouse. All the schoolhouses are in the eastern half of the town, every one of them. Report to the Library Committee, very quickly, just run through this. It's just interesting that they spent $40, half of which was paid for by the state, and for the $40 they bought books for the 4 schools. I don't know how many books. It says, in selecting books, great care was exercised. I think so. Go back here. I was asking Hazel Coffey, whose maiden name is Lounsbury, about Mary Lounsbury. We know Noyes Clark and Tyler Davison. I just don't know much about Mary Lounsbury. We got to learn something about her. So far, she's the only woman that's shown up in here. Isn't that correct? Did I miss something? Isn't she the first woman?
I looked at Alice's book. It was the Lounsbury thing. I family road, the one I spoke to you,
The-
that,
The Crow House?
yes.
Yeah, so she lived where the Bethany Airport Golf, or right next to where the Bethany Airport Golf is now. The foundation for the house is, you know where the Orange National Bank used to be? The foundation for her house is maybe 100 feet south of
The
the...
tall fir tree there, that was written in front of the house.
That's a library and central school. Yep. Annual report of the health officer. I know we're running late and you're probably bored, but I have to read something from here. It talks about patients with diphtheria. Schoolhouses in the town have been fumigated. I'm not sure why. Sanitary conditions of the outhouses in several districts was much improved. Repairs have in some cases been neglected. Common thing to have this neglect in country districts. The lamentable fact is owing to lack of funds with which to pay the expensive repairs. No nuisance have been reported. Few deaths have occurred during the year, the number being 6. The next paragraph I love. In fact, Bethany is a healthy locality, and physicians, in locating, keep clear of the town. This was not a joke. These guys are serious. They consider it would be a hard place to get a living. It's so healthy. Yet people are favored with the services of eminent physicians in town. But I just couldn't misread that part. That's just Tyler Davidson's house, and this is Samuel Davidson here on the porch, and his son Tyler here. And we've both run across them on numerous occasions. Later on, when the automobile arrived, Davidson's Corner got to be a very busy place for records, because when the state created Route 69, they followed Litchfield Turnpike to Davidson's Corner, and then Carrington Road north of there to Prospect, creating a very sharp corner that was especially difficult to negotiate late at night after you imbibe some strong spirits. And as a result, there were numerous accidents at this point, almost weekly. I'm showing this, we must be near the end because we're getting to the commercial of this. But I just want to point out that the reason we have most of these photographs that we just saw is because people have either donated or loaned stuff to the Historical Society that we just wouldn't have had before. I feel pretty good that we've saved a lot of Bethany's heritage. This is a scene actually, I don't know about a tower, but this is a scene on Carmel Road actually. I just like the colors, and this is the end, and I thought you'd like something with this color. No historical significance. I guess you can turn that off. I get the lights, and if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to drone on here until you're all asleep. Ooh, pretty bad, huh? Now you know why I can't talk for 20 minutes.
I think we'll give you a hand.
I don't know if it was worth coming out for. Questions, comments, or should we just go all up to Billy's for ice cream? My throat's dry. I can't answer that. Okay, now those of you who really know about Bethany.